So yesterday I gave sort of a quick overview about what my project was and what I was doing. So now I thought I would just sort of go chronologically about the different places I went in the communities I spent time with. So I started out in India. I spent 3 months in India. And for the first month or so, I was in the Zanskar Valley, which is in Ladakh. So about as far north in India as you can go. I was in a little town, little village called Manda. There are about 20 families in the village. They've had a foreigner there about 2 years ago. And her name was Madame Asha, so I got a lot of questions about if Madame Asha was from my village. So I stood out quite a bit. And I was staying at the Gompa where there are 10 monastics. And what's amazing about Pema Chosling, which is the Gompa, is that it's very young in every sense. Like the Gompa itself is still under construction. So we spent a lot of time, because I was there in the summer, this is prime construction time. So this is the time for gathering stones and wood for the roof and for making mud bricks while they can still dry. But also the nuns themselves are quite young. Out of the 10, 8 are 30 and younger. And the youngest two are 15 and 16. So they're just, you can hear laughter almost all the time. Because there are a couple who are 20 and 21, one is 24, another's 22, so it's just very lively. And I have to keep in mind that it was a very seasonal experience, like because I was there in the summer, and the roads to Zanskar are closed about 8 months of the year because of snow. So this was the time to be outside. This is the time if you're trying to visit any other monasteries or relatives, this is the time to go. So there maybe wasn't as much focus on study and practice as at other times of the year when you really need to be inside. And it's important to think about that in that village there had been a Gompa and in the next village, but those were both closed. So they were really sort of the only monastics around. They still didn't have a lot of lay support. I never saw a lay person really come to the Gompa to offer or to receive teachings, but they would ask the nuns to come and do pujas, the cleansing rituals at their houses and chant. And you could see in how the lay people prepared for that it was a very valuable and important thing for them, how much care they put into providing for the monastics. And they have a lot of challenges because they're so rural. It's a 2-day bus ride from Leh, the major city in Ladakh. It's a two-day bus ride out to the monastery, and the bus is very hard to figure out when exactly it's going. But so it's very difficult for them to have teachers, and there really isn't an abbess, or there's the oldest nun handles some of the organizational stuff, and then the youngest nun actually has the strongest English, so she also does some of the administrative tasks dealing with government officials, and her Hindi would be stronger than some of the older, because they speak Ladakhi. But there isn't someone who sort of takes the lead pushing them in practice or in learning. So I think it would be wonderful for them to have teachers and to have the chance to sort of study and grow in their practice. But also they do puja together every morning, and it's all relative. Like the community is very valuable just in giving them the space to be themselves and to practice. The standard age to get married in the village is 17 or 18. So if that doesn't appeal, you better find another option. And about one of them was a year older than me. She was 24 at the time. And if she hadn't become a nun, she probably would already have been, married with child or children, taking care of in-laws, helping out with the farm. But like the Dhamma was so important to her, and having the chance to practice was so important to her. So even without teachers, they're still making the time and space for that. It was really just, even though there are some limitations and they don't have a lot of resources and don't have a lot of support, it's such a joyful community. I was very sorry to leave and would love to go back, but it's probably also during the summer. And from there, I went to Leh and got to hear His Holiness teach for 3 days, which thank you to Venerable Children for letting me know that that was happening. And then I went to Ahmedabad, which is in Gujarat, and I stayed with Jain sadhvis for a month in the temple. And I didn't know very much about Jainism until I arrived. I knew a few things, but really the image I had of Jain monastics was that they carry the broom to sweep away. I thought of it as sweeping away bugs, but it's also meant to sweep away germs and really any beings, the smallest beings. You don't want to be harming them. It's a very small broom, so you don't sweep before you walk. You sweep before you sit down or lie down. And Jain sadhvis keep 5 vows. The 5 Mahavratas are the great vows. They are absolute. They're almost identical to the first 5 precepts of Buddhism. It's absolute non-violence, absolute non-stealing, absolute truthfulness, absolute celibacy, and absolute non-possession. So not quite the same, but very close. But then from those 5 vows, the etiquette is almost endless. And that's what makes it absolute. So it was definitely challenging for me to keep track of what I should be doing and what was going to be not okay conduct. And for example, like absolute celibacy means no cross-gender touching at all, or even like secondary. So this is also the first place I was sort of given different clothes to wear. The sadhvis wear white, so I was given all white clothing to wear, including the dupatta, which most Indian women wear all the time. But it was just a lot of fabric. And I was very afraid because if my scarf had like fallen and touched the bench that the head monk sits on, it felt like it would have been a calamity because that would have violated the vow. So luckily that didn't happen.
That would be secondary touching?
Yes, so like for my clothing to touch something that a male was touching would be not okay, which was quite... Yes, if you're not touching it at the same time. So like the guru, the head monk, if he wanted to hand me a book to look at, he just had to throw it to me so that it was never touching both our hands at once. So if people there aren't a good catch, it's one thing to sort of read about these vows, and then another to be, sleeping on the temple floor with the sadhvis and keeping in mind all of this all the time. And it was also a good time for me to think about sort of what freedom I need and how much control over my life and how I respond to being corrected all the time. And like, oh, does this really affect me? Or is it just like, oh, I like being talked to like I'm clever. But they were really, really wonderful and really caring. And there were some cultural differences in terms of what I thought I could do alone and like leave temple grounds, and what they thought that was not something I should do alone. But it was really coming from a place of love, and they taught me a lot about patience also, because there's so much care that goes into keeping these vows, and the way like they'll check every piece of cloth and unwrap the brooms twice a day to make sure there isn't an ant caught anywhere in the cloth. And it was also interesting because this was the second place where I really, really stood out, to the point that I think I can credit the Jains with that I can now tolerate public speaking, because I was very much a show pony. I think I was in the newspaper, as far as I know, 7 times, and a national magazine. So because it was known that I was there, so people might come up to me at any time and be like, explain why you're studying Jainism, what are you doing here, where are you from? And the head nun was very fond of having me sing for people when they would show up. I could sort of be brought in, and that was at times mortifying. But really and there were some practices that I disagreed with, but there's also a lot of value to trying it and realizing that even things I disagree with, I can look at those things without discarding everything else, without discarding the whole tradition or disrespecting it. So another place that was difficult to leave. Then I went to Pune, which is a city not far from Mumbai, where I was with laywomen, and still stood out a lot. But I was with a nonprofit called the Green Tara Foundation. That was partly called there by the name. And it's a Buddhist woman doctor who, she was born into what formerly was called the untouchable caste, so the Dalit caste. And Dr. Ambedkar is an amazing sort of figure and scholar of Buddhism, and his teachings affected my thinking a lot, and sort of seeing what he was able to do in his life really inspired her and inspired how she got an education and became a doctor, and then founded a nonprofit that focuses on education and vocational training for Dalit girls from the slums around the office. And this is really like nothing about the organization is explicitly religious. A lot of people don't know what Green Tara means or where that would be coming from. There's a portrait of Ambedkar on the wall, but otherwise it's just all about supporting the women who come into the office, and that's a huge. And you have Muslim women in burqas coming in to learn henna, and as well as a lot of the staff is Hindu, and everyone is just has this safe space. So the same way that monastic community can provide a safe space, the office really gave that. And for her, this really comes out of her bodhisattva vows and her intention to help all beings. And so it's just a really remarkable organization doing so much with very limited resources. Then from there I went on to Malaysia, where I was at a hospice center that was founded and run by a bhikkhuni in a Chinese lineage, because she was a nurse before she ordained. And so it's just, I'd never been around hospice centers or even people dying really in the States, so I don't really know that system, but everything for the patients is free of charge. And it's open to anyone of any religion. And if all the patients are Buddhist, they may play chanting more loudly, but if they have non-Buddhist patients, they won't play chanting audibly. And it's mixed religious staff, and in terms of just selfless service to other beings, they were so amazing. And one of the nurses who was Muslim would encourage patients she knew were Buddhist, she would encourage them to chant, and just the importance of having that faith, and also a place to see people's sort of habitual energies that the habits of their mind from through their life come up as you're dying. But one of the older women, she'd been a temple cook, so she was used to cooking for monks. So when she would sort of have periods of less clarity, and she couldn't just stand up and walk around, but she would be telling us like she could, like, oh, I've started the rice, go do this. Like, okay. But so what, even when she's not really with us, what came up with was the desire to help and to serve others, because that's the habit she built in her life. And while I was there, I also went to a temple, and I thought the sort of interreligious mix of Malaysia was so amazing, because next to this temple, which was a Pure Land temple, next door was a mosque, and next door to that was a church, and next door was a Hindu temple. And if you went a couple of doors down the street, there was a snake temple, which was sort of Taoistic. It was just an understanding that people's faith is important to them, and what you were raised with is probably where you're going, so take your pick, they're all here. And this temple was 6 stories, and it had everything for all phases of this life and beyond. So on one of the floors was a kindergarten, on another floor was an aged care home, and you could get your marriage license, you could get parenting classes, you could do chanting for the dead, all in this one temple. Yes. And I went there mostly for the kindergarten because I wanted to see how you start teaching Dhamma to 3-year-olds. And it's not getting too serious and philosophical, but just beginning with like kindness and goodness, and it was just also very cute. And to see because not all the students were Buddhist, and sort of progressive Malay parents who wanted their children to learn Mandarin would send them to the Buddhist kindergarten. So the Muslim kids did not have to go downstairs and bow to the Buddha. They would stay up in the classroom, and the kids who were Buddhist would go down and bow. It was very cute. So I'll stop there for now, and we have 5 countries to go. Thank you.